And we are 6 pages into chapter 25, uh, uh, advice from Pandit Shashadhar, I think. And we're down to a section. I don't know, the online version that I have here has little topic titles in the gospel that I don't think are in the gospel. But this one, the paragraph starts out, I said to Keshav Sen, and the title, the subject title is Two Kinds of Ego. So, but Ramakrishna says a very direct thing here, and I think it should be obvious from the way that we've talked about things. Ramakrishna said, I said to Keshav Sen that he would not be able to realize God without renouncing the ego. Right? We've talked about how the ego is, in fact, Maya. It is that which blocks us from the vision of the divine. So it's quite obvious, but he's saying it quite out loud here. He's saying that without renouncing ego, we can't see beyond our little picket fence, the little picket fence of ego that separates us from the whole. But he does go on here. He said, sir, in that case, I should not be able to keep my organization together. That's what Keshav Sen is worried about. And Ramakrishna says, he answers him quite nicely. He says, I'm just asking you to give up the unripe ego, the wicked ego. Right? That's the ego of me and mine that is self-seeking first. He says to give up the unripe ego, but there is no harm in the ripe ego or the child ego or the servant ego or the ego of knowledge, right? So those different egos, the ripe ego is the ego where you're well aware of the egoism and you reduce it. You see yourself as the servant of God. You're not just your own man, or own woman. You are subject to your ideal, right? So either the ripe ego or the child ego. The child ego is unique in that it really holds no grudges. It's not attached to things in a deep way. There's no accumulation of karmas in that child's ego. The ego is the child is very present. His anger is short-lived, and he doesn't hold on to things. And the servant ego, of course, is just you making sure that your life is in alignment with the divine will. So you're not off doing your own thing. You always check in with your divine nature first and say, is this something that is helpful to humanity? Is this something that's helpful to my own realization? Then it's okay. And the ego of knowledge. And the ego of knowledge, he really just has that more as the sense you still have a sense of self while you are in relationship with your divine ideal. So that there's a knowing of your place. This is the Gyani. It's like you know that you exist, but you're whittling it away consciously for that union. The worldly man's ego, the ignorant ego, or the unripe ego, it's like a thick stick. It divides, as it were, the water of the ocean of Satchitananda. Right? That's all egoism is about. Egoism, we've talked about, is just setting up boundaries. I'm on this side, you're on that side. I'm this and you're not. I'm not this and you are. It's the thing that separates everything into objects in the unity. And so that's the wicked man is very much about, or the wicked person is very much about that. He believes in that. He believes that the world is separate and that everything is separate from everything else, that there are objects to be desired. There are things to be gotten from the world. So he says, I keep forgetting my place because I keep looking down and then up. The worldly man's ego, the ignorant ego, is like a thick stick. It divides, as it were, the water of the ocean of Satchitananda. But the servant ego, the child ego, the ego of knowledge, that's like a line on the water. One clearly sees that there is only one expanse of water. The dividing line makes it appear that the water has two parts, but one clearly sees that the reality is that there is only one expanse of water. right? And so that's what ripens our ego, or that's what reduces the effect of our ego, is by knowing its unreality to different degrees and different aspects. But it's to live with that knowledge of like, yes, I live in this delusion. I do live in this delusion, but I'm aware that the ultimate reality is greater than that, and that I am not truly this. And so we try and live in such a way that mirrors the reality, right? And we do that by living according to love, just by loving others as we love ourselves. He says Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge in order to teach people. God keeps in many people the ego of a Gyani or the ego of a Bhakta, even after they have attained Brahmagyana. Hanuman, after realizing God in both his personal and his impersonal aspect, cherished toward God the attitude of a servant, a devotee. He said to Rama, "O Rama, sometimes I think that you are the whole, and I am a part of you. Sometimes I think that you are the master, and I am your servant. And sometimes, Rama, when I contemplate the absolute, I see that I am you, and you are I." And you see, so that's really the progression, actually, of the diminishment of the ego. You know that at first there's definitely separation, and we feel that separation, and we live that separation, right? And so in that state, we it's a relationship with between two, God the master and me the servant of the beloved. And so I'm constantly trying to bring my desire or my will into alignment with my divine nature, with the will of God, with the mind of God. And then once you start doing that, then you're a part of God. God moves inside. That's really the progression. It's like we start our religion with God outside, and everything is external. As we begin to practice and begin to learn about our inner nature, and learn more about the inner furniture, how things are arranged within ourselves, then we see that God is in here. I'm a part of that. He's a part of me. We kind of are flexing together, growing together. That there's some crossing of the boundaries there. And then ultimately, of course, once the mind has silenced, and once me and mine has been really reduced to a minimum, then we have that understanding inside. We can see, wow, I'm not really here. I'm the one that's getting triggered, by senses that cause reactions that I take responsibility for. But I'm not really responsible for them, because it's the body and the mind that were triggered. And through that trigger, the body and mind would have carried out those things anyway. But I step in and take responsibility, and that's what clings me to my ego. That's what holds me in my delusion under my karma. And so we see, as that progression grows, as we reach our freedom, we have a different idea. When God ceases to be just an idea, initially he's just an idea. He's outside of us, and there she is. And then little by little it becomes an experience where it's shared. And then finally that knowledge, we're together, we're one without a second in there. Of course, even that one without a second isn't really the one without a second. It's the one with an idea of the second. Right? But it's just an idea. That it's just the way the mind is put together. Yashoda became grief-stricken at being separated from Krishna and called on Radha. Radha saw Yashoda's suffering and revealed herself to her as the divine Shakti, which was her real nature. She said to Yashoda, "Krishna is Chidatma, absolute consciousness, and I am Chit Shakti, the primal power. Ask a boon of me." Yashoda said, "I don't want Brahmagyana. Please grant me only this, that I may see the form of Gopala in my meditation, that I may always have the company of Krishna's devotees, that I may always serve the devotees of God, and that I may always chant God's name and glories." Excuse me. And this is the type of person that Ramakrishna says. There's some people that just are not interested in becoming sugar. They want to taste it, right? They don't want to be the divine music, the divine play. They want to enjoy the divine play. They want to be an observer, a witness, a participant in that. Once the gopis felt a great desire to see the forms of the Lord. So Krishna asked them to dive into the water of the Jamuna. No sooner did they dive into the water that they all arrived at Vaikuntha. There they saw the form of the Lord endowed with his 6 celestial splendors, but they didn't like it. They said to Krishna, "We want to see Gopala and serve him. Please grant us that boon alone. We don't want anything else." They're very happy with their child Krishna and taking care of that, and they just want to see that form and experience that reality, knowing that it's God, knowing that they're in relationship with that Krishna and that he's theirs to take care of and to love and to cherish. And that's what they're after. And so they ask for it. Please give us that boon alone. Nothing else. That's all we want. We don't want to go farther than that. And for those, Ramakrishna says, as I've mentioned, that there's a place in this ocean of Satchitananda where the ice, or God with form, God as Krishna or Buddha or Rama or Jesus, that those forms never melt, right? And so you can have your eternal abode in the company of your ideal, your divine ideal. Before his departure to Mathura, Krishna wanted to give the knowledge of Brahman to the gopis. He wanted to give them that highest understanding, that one without a second. He said to them, "I dwell both inside and outside all beings. Why should you see only one form of mine?" The gopis cried in chorus, "Oh Krishna, do you want to go away from us? Is that why you are instructing us in Brahmagyana?" You see that simple mind. That they would think that Brahmagyana means that he's going to go away from them, which in a sense it would, because the experience would disappear. They didn't really understand the notion of oneness, that it's not that he's going away or that they're going away. It's that they are dissolving into their own true nature, their own true oneness. But Thakur understands, God understands. No, okay, you want company? We'll just play together. No worries. You don't have to go all the way. We can hang out. Really, that's exactly what he's saying. We can hang together. Do you know the attitude of the gopis? It is this: we are Radha's and Radha is ours. A devotee. Does this I of the devotee ever disappear altogether? Master. Yes, it disappears at times. It's an interesting answer here. He's kind of saying that it changes, that it can disappear and that it can come back again. The one attains the knowledge of Brahman and goes into samadhi. I too lose it, but not for all the time. In the musical scale, there are 7 notes: sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, and ni. But one cannot keep one's voice on ni for a very long time. One must bring it down again to the lower notes. I pray to the Divine Mother, "Mother, do not give me Brahmagyana." Formerly, believers in God with form used to visit me a great deal. Then the modern Brahmagyanis began to arrive. During that period, I used to remain unconscious in samadhi most of the time. Whenever I regained consciousness, I would say to the Divine Mother, "Oh, Mother, please don't give me Brahmagyana." Right? Because he has no sense of self. So if he's in that state of Brahmagyana, he can't teach. There's no sense of a body to use in order to teach. There's no separation of himself from the teacher or the teachings, right? It's all one. It's all a simultaneous, just simultaneous whatever. You can't really give it an attribute because it wouldn't work. So it's an unnameable unity. Pundit, does God listen to our prayers? You see where that question would come from? I mean, if God is one with us, is he listening to our prayers? How does that work? Because we think we're separate, but he doesn't think we're separate. And so if I pray to him, is he hearing anything? Is there anyone there to hear it? If God and I are one, then who am I talking to? The Master, God is the Kalpataru, the wish-fulfilling tree. You will certainly get whatever you ask of him, but you must pray standing near the Kalpataru. Only then will your prayer be fulfilled. But you must remember another thing. God knows our inner feeling. A man gets the fulfillment of the desire he cherishes while practicing sadhana. As one thinks, so one receives. Oof, wow. That's something.
So if we ask for less, we'll get less. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah. Well, yes, anything that you say will be, I mean, you get what you ask for. That's what he's saying. If you're sitting there dreaming of cherry pie while you're doing your mantra, the result of your spiritual practice is going to be a cherry pie. That's what he's saying. But of course, it would be the consistent. It's not like if your mind wandered off onto a motorcycle while you were meditating. That doesn't mean you're going to get a motorcycle. It just means whatever you're consistently drawn to, that's what you're going to get. And after this conversation that he's having, we see that it's whatever your ideal of God is, that's what you're going to get. You're either going to go and play with Krishna forever, or you're going to merge into the ocean of Satchitananda forever. It's up to you how this is going to, what your realization looks like, at what level you're going to be in your realization. But there's going to be a knowledge nonetheless, even if you choose to stay separate and enjoy sugar, there is still the potential and I can't say the word experience, but let's use the word not experience, but for our head, we're going to use the word experience. That you even in those times where you're separate, you're going to know your oneness. The veil is going to be so thin at that point. The egoism is going to be so reduced. There's just going to be a couple of little staples holding up that curtain of separation. And you're occasionally going to see beyond it, which will only add to the depth of your love for your ideal when you come back into seeing your ideal as separate from yourself. That because it's that love that binds that oneness. It's that love that is that oneness. And so you're going to go deeper into love and then step out and see separateness, fall a little deeper in love, step out, see separateness. So it's going to be, it's going to be a delightful, beautiful thing, actually. So God is the Kalpataru, this wish-fulfilling tree. You will certainly get whatever you ask of him, but you must pray standing near the Kalpataru, right? So that's an interesting way of saying that. So within you is the Kalpataru, God is that Kalpataru, he's within you. And so you have to have a certain amount of knowledge for that. You can't be completely separate from God and completely in a worldly mind that's enjoying the objects of the world. You have to draw near to the tree. You have to have some inward silence, some inward knowledge, some presence, some establishment inside where the Kalpataru tree grows, in order to have this kind of experience. So it doesn't just come right at the beginning. God knows your inner feeling, right? Because he has your inner feeling. A man gets the fulfillment of the desire he cherishes while practicing sadhana. As one thinks, so one receives. A magician was showing his tricks before a king. Now and then he exclaimed, "Come confusion, come delusion. O king, give me money, give me clothes." Suddenly his tongue turned upward and clove to the roof of his mouth. He experienced kumbhaka. He could not utter either word nor sound and became motionless. People thought he was dead. They built a vault of bricks and buried him there in that posture. After 1,000 years, wow, someone dug up into that vault. Inside it, people found a man seated in samadhi. They took him for a holy man and worshipped him. When they shook him, his tongue was loosened and regained its normal position. The magician became conscious of the outer world and cried as he had 1,000 years before, "Come confusion, come delusion. O king, give me money, give me clothes." I used to weep and pray to the Divine Mother, "O Mother, destroy with your thunderbolt my inclination toward reason, right? My inclination toward reason. That's a very interesting thing to pray right there. Destroy with your thunderbolt, my inclination toward reason. What is it that gives us that inclination toward reason? Can you see what he's really saying there? What the spiritual instruction is? It's like the need to reason means body, mind, identity, right? That propensity for reasoning, because reasoning requires time, space, causation. And so it's stepping into the world of thought, right? It's taking the idea of yourself, placing it in your mind with all of your other thoughts, and living in the world of constant change. That's the propensity for reasoning. It's stepping into the mind as real and thinking about things and living as your idea of self within mind, which is what we do in the normal basis. With this external world and its reality to us, we reason things out. We're always thinking about the best way this, best way that. But the sadhu, the realized soul, the practitioner, lives in that spontaneous moment. There is no reasoning. There's no calculation of doership. What happens, happens as it happens, purely through the inspiration of being, of Satchitananda within. So it's what he's saying. He says, please destroy anything in me that wants to go into being being an ego-driven self. They'll help me to stay in this land of freedom, this space where it's nothing but the expression of love everywhere and always. Pundit, then you too had an inclination to reason, Maharaj or Master. Yes, once. Pundit, then please assure us that we shall get rid of that inclination too. How did you get rid of yours? Master, oh, somehow or other. Sri Ramakrishna was silent a while. Then he went on with his conversation. Master, why would he do that? That's a great answer. Oh, somehow or other. But really, that's an answer you give when a question wasn't really appropriate. You can't really answer that level of a personal question in a group setting like that, And I think he probably sensed something in the pundit's way of asking or something that made him not really want to go that direction. Somehow or other. Don't worry about it. Sri Ramakrishna was silent a while. Then he went on with his conversation. God is the Kalpataru. One should pray standing near it, right? Kalpataru is wish-fulfilling tree, of course. One should pray standing near it. Then one will get whatever one desires. How many things God has created. Infinite is his universe. But what need have I to know about his infinite splendors? If I must know these, let me first realize him. Then God himself will tell me all about them. What need have I to know how many houses and how many government securities Jadu Malik possesses? All that I need is somehow to converse with Jadu Malik. I may succeed in seeing him by jumping over a ditch or through a petition or after being pushed about by his gatekeeper. Once I get the chance to talk to him, then he himself will tell me all about his possessions if I ask him. If one becomes acquainted with the master, then one is respected by his officers too. Everybody laughs. So this is really important to us. It's companionship, it's oneness with the divine beloved. That's what we're focusing on. And so develop that relationship so that you speak directly with your beloved, where you have an active and dynamic relationship with God that follows you around every minute of your day. Every action that you witness is in conversation with the presence of the divine beloved within. You start to understand that this mind that you've been talking to, that you address yourself with, is actually addressing God. This was a thing that occurred to me quite some time ago, back when I was trying to deal with depression, and I noticed that my mind very often spoke quite unkindly to me. Right. That I would often refuse refer to myself as you idiot, or I how stupid of you to do that. I can't believe you did. Anyway, I had harsh words. And part of the thing, one of the things I realized that really helped me to deal with my depression is that my thoughts, when I'm talking to myself, are really addressing the divine principle within me. They're talking to God. And so that really hit me when that occurred to me. And I told myself, I was like, you need to start recognizing that you yourself are sacred and holy, and that you cannot address yourself disrespectfully like that your inner voice should obey all of those descriptions in First Corinthians that we always share. That's such a core verse for me, and it's such a wonderful way to kind of to temper your inner world, to temper your whole being. And so that you should have words inside that always hope and always believe and always trust, words that love truth, that are patient, that are kind, that are uplifting. You don't want to develop an inner voice that's cynical toward you, that's sarcastic, about you. You want a voice. You want a voice in you. You want it's not just a voice, it's connected to you also, but you want to always be encouraging and always believe in yourself, even if you failed 1,000 times. When you apologize to the beloved, God believes in you. He believes you're sorry, even if you've said sorry 10 million times about the same exact thing. He's the one that will believe you that 10 millionth time. And so you also should believe yourself. You should believe you can do this. You should hold on to that ideal. This can be done. It is my destiny. I am already free. I am already beloved of God. I am already realized. I don't experience it because my mind is wandering elsewhere. In one sense, that's really true. It's kind of funny, right? So God is that Kalpataro. One gets whatever he desires. How many things he's created? Infinite is his universe. But I don't need to know all about these things. Let me first realize him, right? Let me develop this relationship. And then let me watch the world from the companionship of God. And from that companionship, so many things unfold. This is how we grow inside. It's not that mother puts more and more information into our head the more and more we spend time with her. It's that more and more the noise goes away, in our head. And as we sit there in silence with the knowledge of being the observer of this world, things become apparent. That which is like just what Tattvamayana says, that which is obvious becomes apparent to us. You get to see the subtle truths, right? That because they're obvious, because they are the way things are. But when we're obeying ego, the ego teaches us with a very loud voice the way it thinks things are. And that blocks out that subtleness within that allows us, that would otherwise allow us to see. There are some who do not care to know the splendors of God. What do I care about knowing how many gallons of wine there are in the tavern? One bottle is enough for me. Why should I desire the knowledge of God's splendors? I am intoxicated with the little wine that I have swallowed. Right? And this, I don't know. I would think that this would be really talking about don't fall in love with religion. Don't fall in love with your own religion. It's like the religion is the sum total. You pay attention to your own experience with the divine, with your own practice, with your own being. Don't fall in love with the philosophy. Don't think that reading lots of these books is the thing. Don't let the pleasure of knowing become your goal. All of those things. Stay closely tuned to Satchitananda, to the love that's within, to finding God within. the person of God. As we think we're self-separate, if we think we're separate from God, then God is separate from us. And in that relationship, even though God and you are one, when you see yourself separate from God, it's not the God part that's unreal. So don't think it's silly to believe in God if God is one with you. Think that it's silly to believe in you, to think yourself separate, that God is at oneness, right? So understand that jnana does not cancel out God. It doesn't make the bhakti stupid because he has an imaginary friend. It's not like that. It makes everybody stupid because they believe they're separate from God. But God is real. God is what is left when you realize, right? So none of us, this has so many interesting little nuances to it that give so much insight into this experience. It's to know that you, as you think you are right now, are never going to realize God. People don't realize God. God realizes God. Because what is the realization? That there's one without a second, that I never existed. I was a tangle of ideas that I attached to, that God attached to. That I give my name to is actually God. But one of the names of God, interestingly enough, one of the names of God is identity, right? So anything that God comes in close proximity with, it's his nature, actually. Getting dangerous talking about God's attributes like that. But anything he draws near to gets his identity. What is his identity? The Satchitananda. It's activated. It becomes the verb, right, of his divine nature. And so that is what realizes itself. God pulls himself out of that attachment, comes to the knowledge of self again. And so and so God keeps realizing God. That's I like to think when Ramakrishna, can anybody complete my thought here? Because I get terribly insecure that I keep saying the same thing, but it's so important. That when Ramakrishna realized God and he saw that infinite ocean of light, the light of consciousness, and infinite, with these waves of bliss that were rushing toward him in such an overwhelming amount that it threatened to undo his very sense of I, his very sense of separateness. Those waves of bliss, each one of those waves of bliss, I like to think, was God's realization of his own self. Somebody, or in our language, somebody realized God, and that wave of bliss is rushing toward that oneness, which would have been Thakur standing in that field or in that ocean, And so it's God that realizes God, because what's left behind is this shell of ignorance that had our name, that had our separation, our self. And so it's really God realizing God over and over and over again, and enjoying these constant waves of bliss that do, in fact, endanger that sense of separateness. Brings us constantly back to one without a second, to a constantly refreshed and new level of love that we could never have imagined possible before. Each moment, again, even deeper, even more, even deeper, even more. Both Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga are paths by which you can realize God. Whatever path you may follow, you will certainly realize him. The path of Bhakti is an easy one. The path of knowledge and discrimination is very difficult. Why should one reason so much to know which path is the best? I talked about this with Vijay for many days. Once I told him about a man who used to pray, God, reveal to me who and what you are. The path of knowledge and discrimination is difficult, indeed. Parvati, the Divine Mother, revealed her various forms to her father and said, Father, if you want Brahmajnana, then live in the company of holy men. Brahma cannot be described in words, Brahman. It is said in the Rama Gita that Brahman has only been indirectly hinted at by the scriptures. When one speaks about the cowherd village on the Ganges, One indirectly states that the village is situated on the banks of the Ganges. Why shouldn't a man be able to realize the formless Brahman? But it is extremely difficult. He cannot. If he has even the slightest trace of worldliness, right? And what is worldliness? It's the belief in objects, right? It's the belief that there's something in the external world that you like or want or need. So if you have even the slightest thought that there's something out there that you want, that something out there is going to make you better, or something out there is going to please you or make you whole or whatever, even just a hint of that kind of thinking prevents you from realizing God through the path of jnana, right? Because jnana is you're not employing God for the path of jnana. You're using your reason and you're backing your own self out of your delusion. But in bhakti yoga, one of the things Ramakrishna says somewhere is that bhakti yoga does not require that level of purity, right? So you can be a human, being, you can be this self that you are, and you can fall in love with God. And it's faster and more effective in this day and age, Ramakrishna says, than these other paths, because we don't have the support for that kind of practice these days. To go off into the mountains, to live in a cave with a group of sadhus, who also are sitting there doing untold hours of practice and meditation and self-control in order to come to that knowledge, that very subtle knowledge of your oneness with all things, and to not let your daily experiences pull you back out into your ego self. That's why the path is so difficult and why it's not the one for this age, right? With bhakti yoga, you can see God everywhere, in everybody. And you can play with God in everyone, everywhere, with everybody. And you can know God within yourself and enjoy the life of the senses without getting attached to them, because you'll always have that knowledge, right? That all of this is God. Yes. So Brahman cannot be described by words. Anybody want to say why that is? Why can Brahman not be described with words?
Because we can't see. It's something that you feel, or whatever the word, experience inside. Brahman can't be seen, can't be touched.
There's
It's
no self to
conscious.
experience.
There's no self, right? Just
Exactly. Because words, right? The way the easy way to talk about it, because if we talk about it in that way, what you say is true, Haima, but everything that you say is said from a dual perspective, right? And so we can't really say that. But I know what you're pointing at, and you're right in what you're saying. But the way to say it is that words require time-space causation.
Mhm.
Without time-space causation, words cannot happen. And because words require a tool that is only real to the mind, it's a tool the mind has created in order to help make sense of this one without a second, in order to break it into pieces so that we can actually be a person, so we can actually have a life separate. And so words require time-space causation. Brahman cannot be seen through time-space causation. That has to be transcended.
meditation gives us the knowledge that I am Brahman.
That's it.
If it manifests over time, then we realize I am also Brahman. Brahman is in me, or I don't know how to explain that. It's
I know where you're
divine.
going.
I are one. Divine and I are one. He's the master, I'm the servant. That knowledge will set in.
Yeah. Well, it's beyond that.
Beyond.
Because there's no sense of I. There's not. That's why we say that Brahman is one without a second. Because if you just say he's one, then you have all that room for stuff like, oh, he's one with me. He and I are one. But you can't say he and I, because you've already made two. And then to say that's one is like, oh, you can't really do that.
I think I dissolve.
You dissolve. That's the right way.
I dissolve into Brahman.
Into Brahman.
Divine. That's what I mean.
That's
Exactly.
exactly it. That's exactly
Mhm.
the way to say that.
Now,
We
as
dissolve.
as we meditate regularly,
Yeah.
practice, and at one point we reach that understanding and we start experiencing it.
Yes, because it's already true.
It is true,
You know,
but we realize it,
that's right. That's
right?
right. Exactly, exactly. And it's yes, and yes. I just laugh because that's the beauty. I mean, that's the thing that's so amazing about this. All you do, live your life with awareness, and you're dissolving the whole time. You're dissolving and dissolving and dissolving. You're that salt doll. And eventually, all the things that have caused your suffering dissolve away. And all that's left is the love that motivated the search.
Very
You know,
true.
all that's left is the love that motivated the search.
I kind of think of Brahman as the event horizon of a black hole.
Okay. Yeah. Why not?
Well, I mean, beyond the event horizon, it can't, time stops. It can't be seen into, you know, it's, you understand what I mean by the correlation.
Probably not at the extent that you know. Um, I've heard that little bit that you've just said. But yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, there's going to be a billion metaphors that we can use to describe this. And part of the reason that they're all acceptable is because there's just that understanding all of them are just a little bit wrong. But that's all right. Anything that helps us go forward using that thorn of the mind to pull out the thorn of ignorance. So he says, whatever path you may follow, you will certainly realize him. So there again is the promise. If you do the work, if you do the practice, if and the practice doesn't require anything, the practice will answer all of the questions as you go. Just do the practice. You may not know, you may not think there's a God, but do the practice of praying to God. Thakur says, if you don't believe that God is there, he actually teaches atheists how to pray. He says, if you don't believe he's there, that's not important. Just say, God, I don't know if you're there. I don't know that you're not there, but if you are there, this is what I'm praying. This is what I'm talking. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm going through. He says, just doing it that way, ultimately, you're going to get enough experience to have a belief to say, hey, wait a minute, where's that coming from? You start this because that love will grow between you and the ideal, even if the ideal is just an ideal in your mind. You don't believe it to be a God or something real. It doesn't matter because you are that, whether you believe in it or not. And by addressing it and drawing close to it and becoming aware of it, its nature will slowly reveal itself to you. Satchitananda, it is self-correcting, right? And so because we are already that, because we are what we seek, there's no requirement except to want to know, the willingness to lay down delusion. The path of knowledge and discrimination is difficult indeed. Oh, we've read that too. Why shouldn't a man be able to realize the formless Brahman? But it is extremely difficult, right? Because it is formless, which means it can't be objectified. It can't be placed in front of your senses. If it has no form, your senses are useless. Your touch can't work because it needs something to touch. Your taste can't work because it needs something to taste. Your ears don't work because they need something to listen to. And Brahman is none of those. He has no attributes. He's beyond attributes. And so what will you use your senses for? How will you discover anything from senses that won't be able to return any information to you? So it is extremely difficult. He cannot, if he has even the slightest trace of worldliness. He can be directly aware of Brahman in his innermost consciousness only when he renounces all sense objects, form, taste, smell, touch, and sound, and only when his mind completely stops functioning. And then, too, he knows only this much of Brahman, that it exists. right? So that's beautiful there, just telling you. Why? Because it's your mind that is deluded. It's your mind that's impure, right? It's the mind that's holding your karma and your ego, or has formed your ego in the mind. And so as long as you keep an idea of yourself within the mind and keep that thought of yourself in the mind amongst all of your other thoughts, and you actually think that all these things have something to do with you and that all these thoughts are about you and arranged in the world around you, there's no way to see beyond that. You have to get behind that where the mind is absolutely silent. And when the mind is absolutely silent, then there's a knowing that's not going to be describable. You're not going to be able to turn the mind back on and tell everybody, because it's a reality. It is the reality, and the reality cannot be captured by any sense of limitation. And for anything to fit into the mind as a thought, it has to be limited. It has to be restricted, right? And so this is not going to happen in the mind as a thought. This is going to happen as a knowing. It's complete in and of itself. So we have to become aware of Brahman in our innermost consciousness, and we can do it only when we renounce all sense objects, and our mind completely stops functioning, which means there's no thought in it. It itself has become witness, right? The mind becomes the satellite dish faced at the divine. And when it's in that state of listening, anything that arises in it is the voice of the beloved, because no ego is making a voice arise into it. No sense of body mind, no processes or sensations coming from body mind are being processed, right? So there's no ripples to break the reflection into multiple pieces. So we have, once the mind ceases to function, becomes quiet, then we know. We don't see or experience anything. It's deeper than that. It's knowing. It's a knowing, a grokking of the reality. But even in that state, we only know one thing about Brahman, is that it exists. because we're not using the mind to come up with a bunch of attributes to describe what's happening to body mind. Quoting from an Upanishad, all right, quoting from an Upanishad, the Pandit said, "It is to be experienced only as existence, Master. In order to realize God, a devotee should make use of a particular attitude, the attitude of a hero or a friend or a handmaid or a child in relationship to God," right? And so you build that relationship. And what's that going to do? Why do you get your choice, whether it's a God, as a lover or as a husband or as a child or as a friend? You get that because it doesn't matter. Whatever you think God is wrong. So think of God any way that you want to, within these parameters. A relationship that's built on love, that's the only requirement, right? A relationship built on love and respect. And step into that relationship with the beloved. Why? Because God will manifest between you and your idea of her or him, right? And that love that exists between your wrong idea of self and your inaccurate idea of God, the love in between is going to grow regardless. And that love will consume both your wrong idea of God and your wrong idea of self, and become the thing itself, the third party, because it's absent of ego. It can't be you. It can't be you becoming God, because you are an ego construct, right? And it can't be God becoming you, because your God is just a concept, right? You don't know it. And so neither one of those components is going to be the thing. The thing is going to grow spontaneously, free of the direction of your ego or the desires of your body mind. It's going to grow independently between the two, And ultimately, you're going to fall, you as this idea of self is going to diminish, just going to dissolve because it's going to be inaccurate and the inaccuracies are going to be obvious. And your concept of God is going to diminish because God is no longer an object or a thing to be experienced. It is the love that grew silently and secretly between these two wrong ideas and gives birth to a union, to freedom, to an infinite oneness. But it is the love itself that is God, that is the divine. And it will take care of all problems. So to touch God, you don't need to know what God is. You just have to have a wanting, a desire to know God. And that desire, born of Satchitananda and led by Satchitananda, and dissolves back into Satchitananda. Mani Malik, only then can one feel attached to God, by having one of those relationships with God, either as your father or your lover or your friend or your child, or you are the servant of the master. The master says, for many days I cherished the feeling that I was a companion of the Divine Mother. I used to say, I am the handmaid of Brahmamai, the blissful mother. O companions of the Divine Mother, make me the mother's handmaid. I shall go about proudly saying, I am Brahmamai's handmaid. Right? Just this wonderful relationship. And you see in the relationship, he was a woman. He was her handmaid, right? So we can transcend everything about this body and this mind as we approach God, because all of it's going to be thrown away in great joy as we jump in to go swimming in the Brahman. All right, we'll stop there for today.